professional women in career change. And in general, my larger mission in life is to support women moving into leadership roles and support workplace policies that are really effective for promoting and supporting diversity. So I'm really honored to be moderating this panel of amazing women today who are breaking all kinds of barriers in the workplace, and they have really amazing stories to share with you. I just wanted to, before I have them introduce themselves, well, we have Hallquist, we have Marni Karlin, Meghan Ireland, and Emily Harrison. So I'm going to have them tell you their stories in just 1 second, but I just wanted to quickly give a little bit of context for this panel. These are some statistics from a 2018 McKinsey study on gender in the workplace, and I can pass that study on to any of you that are interested, but basically women are still underrepresented in the workplace everywhere. 1 in 5 C-suite leaders is a woman, only 1 in 25 is a woman of color, and there's a myth that that's because women leave to take a few years off for young children, but that really, this study shows that that really isn't the case. Women and men leave workplaces at the same rates. Women are actually hired into entry-level jobs at lower rates than men, and men hold 62% of manager jobs, women only 38%. Women have less support from their managers, less access to leaders, deal with more harassment and discrimination, and of course this is even worse for women of color and LGBT employees. 1 in 4 LGBT employees experience employment discrimination. 1/4 of transgender employees are fired, not hired, or denied promotion because of their gender identity. And 53% of LGBT employees have reported negative work environments. So we have a lot of work to do for sure, and these are women that are doing it. I think there's a lot of hope for sure, and that really is represented here at this table. So I'm going to have each of them tell you a little of their background, and really excited to learn from them. We'll talk for 40 minutes or so. We have some big issues we wanted to talk about with you, and then we'll open up to question and answer from you guys.
Good morning. My name is Marni Karlin. I'm based in New Orleans, Louisiana, so the weather here is fantastic. We're there right now. I run my own consulting company, and I focus on policy and advocacy and legal consulting, specifically in the sustainable and organic food and agriculture space. Prior to that, I had about a 20-year career in Washington, D.C. I ran the Government Affairs Department of the Organic Trade Association. Before that, I worked on Capitol Hill for the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I also was in private legal practice for a number of years. I also have a culinary school degree in between private legal practice and shifting into a more policy-focused space. I took some time off and went to culinary school because it was something I was passionate about, and I thought it would give me some space to think about what I wanted to do next and how I wanted to shift my career from traditional law firm law to something else where I could make a difference in an area that I was excited about. That's a little bit about me.
Hi, I'm Hallquist. I'm a proud transgender woman. I live in a beautiful place. I have a beautiful family. I've had a very successful career. I spent a lot of time keeping the lights on here in Vermont. Today, I'm the CEO of a company called Cross Border Power in Canada, and our mission is to solve climate change. And there's a lot of investors across the world who are interested in solving climate change. That's the good news. So, I'm always, my passion in life is to solve climate change. It has been since 2004. I'm taking the path of least resistance, which is through the investor community, because it's clear the governments our government specifically is moving way too slow on this issue. But I think the investor community is moving much faster.
Hi, I'm Emily Harrison. I run the distillery for Whistlepig Whiskey in Shoreham, Vermont. My background is, I come from Kentucky, so bourbon's in my blood. Worked at a couple of big distilleries down there before moving to something small up here. Like it a lot more. Scenery's great.
Hi, I'm Meghan Ireland. I also work for WhistlePig. I'm the quality assurance supervisor there. My background is basically chemical engineering. It's kind of my first big girl job. So yeah.
Great, thank you all. So let's start off with just talking about some of the industry challenges that you all have experienced in terms of gender discrimination and other diversity issues, biases you've experienced. And maybe we could get into a little bit of generational differences too. Are we seeing some progress? We have some early career women here, and then some of us are a little further along in our careers, so maybe we can discuss sort of where we are now, where we've come, and where we are in terms of the industry challenges.
I guess I'll start. So early in my career, I was a big firm lawyer, and I experienced a lot of challenges being a young woman and a young-looking woman, younger looking than I was, in big firms in Washington, D.C. I'm not convinced that Washington, D.C. was the problem. I think big firms were the problem. And it was hard. It was hard to be taken seriously. I had at times been told sort of things I could wear that would make me be taken more seriously. And I eventually left for a number of reasons, but one of which was that I didn't see a path to success for myself. Not only did I feel like I was going to have to start following rules and doing things that I didn't feel authentic to me, I also didn't see any women in senior positions on whom I wanted to model. Very few at all, and those who I did see, I didn't want to model my sort of balance on what I saw in theirs. And then I shifted into policy work, working on the Hill, which does attract a lot more women, is still a very hard job and a very time-consuming job and requires a lot of skills, but sort of leaves some of that, at least in the offices I was in, some of those gender issues by the wayside. And then I moved into the organic ag space, where almost everyone I worked with was a woman. And that was actually also, it's hard for me to know how much of it was me maturing into my space and how much of it was the space changing. And I imagine that it was a bit of both. But I found myself then in a space where it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether I was a woman or not. I was doing my my job. Now, of course, I've started my own company, and so it's me. My boss is me. So hopefully she's not bad. But I do think I think that one of the things that I've seen, and hopefully we'll be able to have some time to talk about it, is different workspaces that have different flexibilities and opennesses to different ways of doing things, right? My experience was that in a law firm, this was the way we did things. And so if you didn't do it the way we do it, then that was outside of the norm and not something that could be understood. And often the way we do it was a relatively sort of masculine-driven way. And my experience both on the Hill and in the organic sector was that both of those areas had a little more flexibility towards innovative thinking, a little more flexibility towards, well, let's just see what works, and that created space for me to bring my perspectives, some of which are probably driven by the fact that I'm a woman.
Well, first I'll start by saying that, Fox News said I had transgender privilege. But what they missed is, no, I have male privilege. The reason I'm successful, the root of this is because I'm a mid-career woman. So, I spent most of my career as a man. And of course, I always knew I was different. So when I was in 9th grade, I was afraid I was going to get killed by my peers. So I learned how to act like a man. I toughened up, I took up sports, I stopped taking shit from anybody. And that worked really well for me until my conscience, started to set in my late 40s. And I have this unique experience of living in both genders. And of course, my focus on changing my gender was really for my children. We had this trusting, loving family relationship, and they didn't know the most important thing about me. Now, I didn't know the experiences I was going to have as a result of transitioning. And if you look at my gubernatorial campaign, I took a lot of hate and vitriol and even death threats, and I expected those. I expected those because I was transgender. I didn't realize that most of those vitriol and threats were the same vitriol and threats that are directed towards women candidates. And we have these trigger words. These trigger words, for each of us has our individual trigger word. Mine trigger word, which, it took me several years of counseling to understand it. But my trigger word is, you only think about yourself. Now, of course, I understand that's a lot to do with gender and all the things that happen. But another trigger word that men use with women is you're ugly. And especially that's directed towards female candidates. You don't see that directed towards male candidates. My answer to that is, hey, dude, I'm 63 years old. I've earned this ugliness. Get over it. and by the way, what does looks have to do with anything in terms of our competency to do our jobs? And I say that because I think that's a trigger word. And if we look at the gender construct, the gender construct is severely outdated. And I say the gender construct because we designed the construct of a male to go fight wars, to go out and kill the animals and bring them back. And, we have to be tough. We have to cut off ourselves from our emotions. And that gender construct is totally contrary for the issues we're facing in the world right now. When you look at climate change, it's really about collaborating. It's collaborating with countries that we may not even like, but we have to collaborate. We have to go beyond our borders. And now I'm going to tell you some individual personal experience that I had as a result of my transition, which men just don't have. When I transition, I have this wonderful relation. I have a wonderful relation with all my kids, and I could brag about them forever. But my middle daughter, I had dinner with her every 3 weeks. She lives in Burlington, and about a week and a half after I transitioned, she said, how's your transition going? And I said, well, I think I'm experiencing transphobia. But she gave me the gift of understanding, because she said, why do you think you're experiencing transphobia? I said, well, because I was in a meeting with these fellow CEOs, of course they're all men, and I said something in the morning, they didn't hear me. A little later on I said something, they didn't hear me. It was unusual. That afternoon, one of the men said something that I had said in the morning. He said, oh yeah, Christine talked about that this morning. My daughter said, that's not transphobia, welcome to being a woman. And then, walking down the street, it happened the first 9 months. I had to get over this experience of not wanting to punch the person out. But I would get strangers on the street who told me to smile. I mean, what the hell? That never happened to me as a man. And who are you to tell me to smile? I'm gonna own my emotion here, and you got to get over it. I don't even know you. And there's all these subtleties that we don't realize. And of course, I was CEO of one of the most macho businesses that you can imagine. Keeping the lights on, line work. And just to give you an idea, an average line worker starting pay is about $80,000 a year. The 16 of the 20 top paid people in our company were field workers, and they deserve it. But there's not one female line worker in the state of Vermont right now. Very few in the country. So these are the things, the challenges that are ahead of us. And the challenge is, and I'll tell you another thing that I notice, especially when I'm dealing with investors. I've been doing a lot of dealing with investors. And I plan on continuing to be as strong as a woman as I was as a man. I'll be sitting down with investors, and I'm the one they're investing in, and they're talking to each other without even looking at me. At one meeting in Montreal a couple weeks ago, I said, hey, over here. Literally, I am that strong, and I make no excuses. Because woman, as a female, I believe we all have to stand up for each other and support each other and call the attention to it. And of course, people are going to use the trigger words. They're going to call you a bitch or whatever. But, we just have to get over that.
I like that. So I come from a big alcohol industry in Kentucky. It's a bit of a good old boys club, and everything that comes with it, you know, a unionized environment. I worked in the distillery where it was the oldest people in the union that worked there, and I came in as a 23-year-old trying to supervise them. So yeah, it went well. No, actually though, it did go a lot better because I was expecting my issue to be with the union people. No, it was with my bosses and with my co-manager, like my other supervisors and all that sort of thing, because they couldn't take me seriously because they had all worked their way up there. Where I came in with a college degree, they had worked their way up from the union, had been there for 40, 50 years, however long, and they thought they earned their place where I stole mine. And I knew my time there was up whenever my boss had left, my new boss I was talking to, I was like, well, I'm kind of qualified for, you know, manager position. Maybe I could interview for it at least. Like, would it be worth it to put in my application at least? I should have just done it, honestly. But he kind of looked at me and was like, I don't think you're going to get that until, like, maybe you've had a family, you're a little later in your career, like at least 30. So that didn't work. But coming up to a smaller company has been a lot easier because I can actually, I don't know, they're more willing to change. They're like, I hired my team, and actually Meghan helped me hire my team because whenever we're doing interviews, I also realized that I needed to interview with another woman. Because whenever I was interviewing with my boss, they just answered all my questions that I asked to him. I'm like, oh, well, can't hire you. So I'm going to interview with Meghan and make her sit. And yeah, you're going to have to talk to at least one woman in the room and see how you interact. But yeah, so I've actually been able to make changes there, which has worked a lot better than trying to change this culture that I'm in right now is more willing to change than a culture that was established and kind of fights back with you. So yeah, that's my experience in the workplace, I guess.
Yeah, I think for both of us, a lot of it has to do with, like, at least partially how young our company is. WhistlePig's only 9 years old, so they have a tendency to be, they're not stuck in their ways as a lot of alcohol industry places are. Especially most of the big names, like she was saying down in Kentucky, I did some interviewing down there when I was looking around, and most of the positions are generational. It's just not, it's hard to get into, period, let alone as a girl. So coming up here and interviewing, they were very welcoming. It was, I think it's partially a generation and an age thing within the company that they're willing to change. They've been incredibly supportive for both of us. So yeah.
Great, thank you all. I think that we're getting into, the issue of how a lot of what we have to contend with as women and transgender women is not necessarily like the overt discrimination or overt sexual harassment that is sort of easier to call out, but it's these subtleties that wear at us, I think, as women. And so how do you all see any ways that organizations can sort of start to address those subtleties in a way? Are there cultural things that organizations can implement, policies in a way? Is there anything we can do at an organizational level to address these kind of microaggressions that we're facing? Or is it just that we have to do it at an individual level and call it out, like you said, Christine? Want to start down at the other end?
I would say, at least in my experience, a lot of it is just me calling it out and me making sure that I'm putting in the effort to be heard. I have had like the same experience as Christine was saying, where like I said something in the first 5 minutes of a meeting that lasted 2 hours. Someone like said it at the end, and it was the solution to the problem. I was like, I could have been out of here an hour and 45 minutes ago. So I guess it's just like making sure we're heard more and being a little more assertive, I think.
Yeah, also calling out when you do get those harassments, like being told to smile. At a past job, I've been told I should wear my hair down more because I look prettier. So I aggressively wore my hair up for like several months. I was like, and it's never coming out of a bun now. No, but it's calling out those sorts of things, and I mean, just snapping right back at it, because being told to smile is not an acceptable response. It's just about appearances. It's not about anything about your competency in your job. Like, yeah. And then for policy-wise, external hiring, if there's, I mean, look outside the box. If there's a cultural problem within your company that you're trying to change, hiring people within your company might not be the solution.
Well, I will say that, you know what, one of the things that enabled me to transition successfully was the fact that Vermont has very strong laws in terms of protection of LGBT individuals. So I think having strong policies is critically important. But strong policies are pretty meaningless if the CEO is not committed. You know, the CEO has to be committed. And, you know, I spoke at a conference 2 years ago, a leadership conference in Australia, and the VP from Google, the VP in charge of diversity at Google was there. She said her office is right next to the CEO's office. And the reason that the CEO of Google put her office next to his office was because he wanted them to walk by that diversity office, you know, recognizing it's a value. So, you know, I talk with folks who have issues in their company. You know, the human resources folks will come to me and say, you know, we're trying to make these changes, we're trying to make these changes. I said, well, is your CEO committed? And if they say no, I said, forget it. You know, you're really pushing against the river. Now, I will tell you that, you know, those advanced companies like Google and Apple and others that are working with high tech and working on the leading edge of technologies recognize the power and value of diversity. Because a diverse population leads to diverse thinking and leads to those breakthrough ideas. So we have these stagnant industries like the fossil fuel industries that are being propped up, you know, with tax money that we should just stop doing, because ultimately, if we had to compete on our innovation, diversity would be valued much higher, I believe.
Yeah, I would say I would agree, first of all, with what Christine said, that having strong laws and strong protections in place from a government perspective is critical, but it's not the only thing, as she said. And I think when I think about companies, I would echo a lot of what she said, that I think without a true commitment, and not just in name. I mean, I've worked at companies where there's a diversity committee or a women's issues committee. That's always my favorite. I struggle with that for a number of reasons. That are just there in name so we can check the box that we've done something about this. It's all going to be better for those women now. We're not going to actually change the way the companies works. We're not actually going to change the way we listen to people. I mean, I think changing the way we listen to people is a huge piece of it. And a lot of that, from my perspective, is sort of individual to individual. It's not like you can have a committee that tells people how to listen. You can do some trainings, of course, but you know, I think in my career, I've experienced everywhere, and probably in many of our careers, we've experienced everything from the outward harassment, the I need to leave this job because I've been sexually harassed by my boss, to the microaggressions, the someone cutting in on you and speaking, or we've all had the experience that was just identified around offering a solution at the beginning of a meeting and then a man offering it an hour later, and that being the best idea in the world. And I think speaking up for that, I think from my perspective, the individual act of responding to that in whatever way is most authentic to you, right? Like for all of us, it may not be calling that out right in that moment, and that's okay. I think that was something I also had to learn, because my personality tends not to be, despite the fact that I'm a lawyer, I'm not very confrontational. And so trying to call that out in a way that doesn't feel right is also not right, right? And it'll be different for each of us. But finding a way to call it out. One of the things that I thought one of my prior employers did well was created a variety of pathways to reporting issues. So you didn't just have to report it to the HR team, right? Or you didn't just have to report it to the CEO or to your boss, right? There were a variety of people who were responsible to be reported to, and then to handle sort of the details of how one would handle a harassment issue, a discrimination issue, any sort of thing. And so in my experience, in that company, I was one of the people who could be reported to, and in my experience, it created space for people to handle those issues in the way that they felt most comfortable. They perhaps could feel like they wouldn't be retaliated against. You don't want to go to your boss and say that he or she has actually been harassing you, right? That's not an effective pathway to solving that problem. And so I think that might be a thing that companies could think of, sort of a concrete way to manage this that companies could think of. But a lot of it, I think, is empowering individuals and creating a space where individuals feel that when they say something, it will be heard and acted on. And how you do that, there are lots of ways.
Yeah, I've heard I read a couple of articles about sort of this disturbing backlash to Me Too, and I've actually heard of it anecdotally on campus too, of men saying, okay, well now I'm just not gonna meet with women alone at all. And yeah, I've heard some male professors, I'm not gonna, meet alone with women students. And it's like, no, that's not the point, and that's the worst way to handle it. Just stop sexually harassing them. But I think Christine touched on this a little bit, but we're here with a lot of really innovative people who are trying to really think creatively about changes in the food industry and coming up with creative products and creative business models and innovative ways of thinking. So how do we integrate, sort of creative, innovative thinking about incorporating women and diverse folks into organizations that are doing other innovative work? Do the two marry well together? How can we envision that?
I mean, I think that I see that in my work in the organic space, and I do some work in sort of more traditional food and nutrition and hunger space, and so it's been very interesting to me to draw comparisons. Oftentimes, folks in organic and sustainable ag, they're innovative thinkers to begin with, right? They want to do it differently from how, granted, it's actually probably a lot more like how things were done way, way long ago, but differently from how they were taught how to do it in their ag schools, right? Or taught possibly even by their parents to do. And they often will think outside of the box in what they're in their agricultural practices and what they're doing. And I've seen that bleed into thinking more creatively about diversity, about how to engage different thoughts and different viewpoints at a table, et cetera. In some of my work with some of the more traditional food and ag space, those have been the clients where I've had to sort of say, no, don't interrupt me. Like, I'm gonna finish what I had to say, and then we can have this conversation. I just had a meeting 2 days ago where I had to do that. It felt like every 2 minutes. It probably wasn't every 2 minutes. But I had to continually say, I would just like to finish my thought, and then we can continue. I have so much less of that in the organic and sustainable space. And so my hypothesis is similar to what Christine just said, that some of that is because that's a space where people are trying to think innovatively, think creatively. Perhaps there are more women to begin with. And so it creates space for that, which is a good thing in this regard as well.
I'm going to say something that's not necessarily acceptable, but at the same time, it's what we have to do. What I intentionally, in my last job, made sure that the leadership team was fully balanced. And it's 3 women, 3 men. Now, is that intentional? Well, yes, it is, because I think that you have to have that balance. The energy industry is 19% woman. So and as maybe you've heard, I think it was Kristen Gillibrand the other day, Fox News said, look, you guys are already at the table. So I kind of have a right to do this as a leader. And you know, and starting this new company, I can see it's going to be an uphill battle because the energy industry is so dominated by men and male thinking and that whole male buddy system. But it is definitely something I, as CEO, am going to focus on. And you know, as it may bother the male population for me to say this, but it's important strategically for the future of this company to have balance.
Yeah, going from a large company to a small company, with a small company, I feel like I get a lot more face time with like significant people in the company. I'm not, you know, frontline worker at that point. I'm actually a face and a voice, and having a voice like that and being able to be heard is really important in order to get promoted and get your ideas through to everything. So I think with a smaller, more innovative company, that kind of goes hand in hand because there's less people, so your voice is louder and you can get heard. And even if it is still I think we're still a male-dominated team. Yeah, still a male-dominated team, but I still have a voice now where I don't feel like I had one before in a larger company.
Yeah, I think the innovation part of it is big. Like Emily said, we're heard at WhistlePig, which is awesome. I think some of my best conversations and meetings are what I call hallway meetings with the CEO. I just run into him and I'm able to talk and put out what I'm thinking to him. But I think just as a company overall, we're pretty innovative thinking. And I think it helps. They pay attention. I don't.
Well, I'd love to open it up for questions and give you all a chance to pick this panel's brain as well. Yes.
So one of the things that I read about the glass ceiling is for applying for a job, a man feels he only needs 20% of the capabilities to apply for that job, where women are unbelievably thoughtful. They actually feel they need to have 75–80% of the qualifications to apply for that job. I'm just curious, in your careers, did you find that in yourself? I heard someone not applying for a job because maybe they weren't qualified. Did you find that in yourself? You're thinking about that ceiling and should I apply and not to apply?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Especially, I've just been on the job search for the second time in a couple of years, and when I was applying to jobs, I kept having to remind myself, you can just take a leap there. I still constantly feel like I'm underqualified for the position I'm in, which I'm assuming I'm not. I don't think I am.
Great.
I'm doing great. But no, I have that doubt in myself because every other distillery manager that I've seen has been in the industry for 10 years, has maybe a degree, maybe not, probably no higher education in terms of, I have a master's degree. And yet still, I feel like I'm constantly doubting myself because even in the application process, I was throwing my name out for things I was qualified for, but wasn't where I wanted to be. So instead, I started applying more aspirationally, which I feel like whenever my fiance was job hunting, every position he applied to was aspirational at that point. It was just, he had 1 year of work experience and yeah, that's enough for him. Yeah.
I should tell you, I never had that problem, but you can guess why.
So interesting. I just want to say a couple more words on that. I don't know how, but I didn't have that problem either, and I don't know why. I cannot point to it, but I have always been an aspirational. I apply for jobs that I am not qualified for, right? And I always think, they can tell me no, right? I don't need to tell me no. They can tell me no. What's the harm? But I can't tell you how many female friends I have who would come to me and say like, oh, I'm thinking about applying. I have this very close friend who is extraordinarily qualified in all the things that she does. And I saw a job. I knew she was on the job hunt, and I saw a posting, and I was like, this is your job right here. She said, oh no, but I don't have, and she pointed to one thing on the list of 50 qualifications, right, that she doesn't have. And I was like, no, if you don't apply for it, I'm gonna write your resume. I'm just gonna send it in for you because we're all we're taking ourselves out of the running, right? We're telling ourselves no, and you're right, and you're right as well. Most men don't do it that way, right? So I don't know what water I was drinking that got me to be applying aspirationally for things, but I think that it's really important for us to mentor other women to be aspirational as well. Why not? Let them tell you no.
One thing, I have been reading a lot of that research too, and one interesting thing about it is some of the studies have shown that it's not that women don't think they can do the job, it's that they don't think they'll be considered for the job. So they're like, I know I could kick ass at that job, but they're not gonna hire me. So it's kind of it's not that they don't think they can do it, it's that they don't think they'll be considered, and there's some numbers to show that they're kind of right in thinking that. So there is some work to be done in HR departments, of course, for really making sure you're evaluating all the applications equally and maybe giving women preferential treatment. Let me just throw that out there.
I'm going to add to that. I think it's a great point because I can tell you I will never apply for a CEO job in Alabama.
So I run a small farm and the 3 women that are in charge of this. And so to help ourselves, we got together with a lot of other women who run farms. And one of the things I noticed is when we started having meetings, we were trying to make this collaboration. The women did not want to financially put money into the game to support each other. And I found that really surprising. We thought it would be a no-brainer, that everybody would help, and so we would make a larger collective, and then we could all help each other. And the other women thought it wasn't worth the risk. And I wonder what it is about us women that we don't feel we're worth the risk.
Do you have an example of that, maybe?
Well, it was a women's collaboration, and we would put money into a pot, and then you could borrow it to buy a new tractor, and then we'd all pay it back, and then you could put the money back in, and you could start another part of your business. But women were not willing to put that in. They didn't feel we were a good risk. And it was us. We were the ones that weren't the good risk. And I found that really surprising. I think it's a women's self-help group. I learned it at Heifer International. That's how you can get ahead, by becoming your own bank.
Right. I mean, I think women are just as much a part of the patriarchy as men are as well, and we've certainly absorbed the messages. And I really applaud Meghan and Emily for being such strong women so early in their career. It took me much longer to be aware of how I was thinking about myself as a woman and placing myself in the world in that way. What do you guys think? Do women support other women?
What do you think? I think me and Emily try pretty hard to support each other at work. And we have a couple supervisors who we're able to go to as well that I would be willing to support. I don't know. I don't have a good...
Try to support, yeah.
I guess one thing, this isn't on financial support, but when you put it in the terms of do women support women, one thing that resonated with me there is, some do, right? But I shouldn't say we've all, I've definitely had the experience of, earlier in my career, of women who had put up with the patriarchy, and so if you, young woman, want to succeed, you too will have to put up with this, right? So that's another example of women not supporting women, right? It's not finance, but it's women who have fought through that fight, and instead of working to make it a different situation for the women coming behind them. And that's something that I found very difficult as a young woman, and I think is critical in how we mentor. And I think I've said mentor twice now, which might tell you how I feel about mentoring. I think it's really important and critical. And I think it's important to bring people up, right? Not to make people fight the same battles we fought. I didn't fight them so that you also have to fight them, right? I fought them so that we would have a different system. And so that may be another way that women can support women. The financial part I'm a little less familiar with, but I think that's critical.
I am finding my way in my career as a young woman, and I recently was hired for a position I've been for a year now that feels like the best fit. I'm succeeding. I've never been more confident, but I find myself experiencing what I've started calling ambition anxiety, where I know I'm doing well, and like I asked to come here, they paid for me to come to this. I have no question about doing those things, and I'm confident to ask for what I want in order to continue to give to this company. But then there's this little voice in my head that makes me insecure about my coworkers in particular, perceiving my ambition, my willingness to ask for things in a small company. I'm just curious if you have any advice for that little voice in my head to push through it. I don't have any doubt that I can, because I am, but it's definitely present. It's emerged at this point in my life. It's very interesting.
Well, I'll just start by saying, my goal in life, I'd love to get through, not waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, whether I run for governor or starting a new business. But as my partner said the other day when I told him on the phone, I said, geez, I still wake up in the middle. He says, and you probably did that for the 13 years at your past job too. I said, yeah, you're right. I think there's that normal panic that we have. Maybe that's part of being human, and I think there's a healthy side of it and there's an unhealthy side of it, but certainly, certainly on the ambition side, I would just say, don't hold back your ambition. It's not a dirty word.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, and also I would say, the fact that you're aware of it is kind of half the battle, right? So you're not going to overstep. You're going to know what the inappropriate behavior is. If it feels really, I don't know, in my experience anyway, when it feels really wrong, that's when it's wrong. When I'm just a little nervous about it, that is my own fear that I have to work my way through. That's very much personal, I guess. So who knows? But I believe it. I believe that we all know in our gut when we've overstepped, and it doesn't sound to me, like you maybe use that as your touchstone.
Have you gotten any comments about your ambition or any?
It's just in my head. I'm new and I'm young and I'm just like feeling it out. But I kind of came in pretty hot.
Good for you.
Can I add too that even if you get comments about your ambition, pay attention to who the source is. That's really important, because of course, there are many people who see other people's success as their failure. And you don't own that, right? So always, when you get those, because you've already got this going in your conscience already, so you're going to be very alert to it, but make sure you evaluate who sends that message, because you might get those messages.
Thanks in the back. Hey, I think I would add to your message about women supporting each other, and women and people of any difference in the workplace or looking for jobs is age, because I was at the top of my game. I took time off to take care of my mother who passed and went back to the marketplace, and because I'm at the top of my career and would probably command more than someone else who's coming into the position, it's been a struggle. So I think having the long years of experience and a lot of contacts, I started my own business because I help with you. And I think a lot of people are doing that now. A lot of women are doing that now because the constraints of the traditional workplace don't allow the creativity that women tend to put into their work in terms of how to get from point A to point B. They're not going to take that, well, this is how we do it. They generally tend to go, well, this way and that way, kind of like a river. And I think the message in your head is just fear of success, and that you should just aim for that target and go for it and work your butt off. The only thing you can do is fail and get up and try again. And Eleanor Roosevelt had something to say about that.
Yeah, I think women entrepreneurship is hugely on the rise, and with my client, I work a lot with corporate women from all industries, and they've really found the corporate world pretty toxic at a certain point. It didn't allow for them to go through their natural cycles, whether it's having children, taking care of parents, or just accepting that you change, as you age, and you don't necessarily want this linear, perfect career ladder path, but you're going in different directions, and like you said, being creative and being innovative, and entrepreneurship seems to be a way that a lot of women are able to find themselves. They can't do it in a traditional workplace.
That was definitely a piece of the puzzle for me, and that's part of why I started my consulting business a few years ago. Resonates a lot with what you said, and a lot with what you just said. It's funny, my dad, with whom I am extremely close, has never understood my nonlinear path, and that's what he likes to call it. And he's an engineer, so he understands linear paths. And at my wedding a year ago, he gave this toast in which he totally finally got it. Like, he finally sort of gave this toast where he talked about how I had done all sorts of things that didn't make any sense, and this and that, but like, look where I have arrived. And I was like, yeah, and the only way I could have arrived there was by doing this. For me, a straight path was not authentic, would not have worked, didn't play to my skills. I never thought I was doing the wrong thing in any of those steps. Clearly, he may have at moments, but I think it's important to hear that in yourselves. And to something that Emily just said, I am also very impressed, because I certainly didn't have any self-awareness around that. When I was younger in my career, it took me some years to sort of not feel like not taking a linear path was a failure. When I left the law firm, I thought I had failed at being a lawyer. Looking back, I can acknowledge that that's in fact in no way true, but at the time, I absolutely thought it. So I think I'm very excited about hearing some of the younger women sort of not being constrained by those things that constrained me 15 years ago.
As a recovering engineer, let me talk about that linear path. And the linear path approach is totally flawed for where we are today. And this is why this innovation and women in the workforce and all this is so important. And I'm going to refer to the Buckminster-Fuller curve of learning, of global learning. And IBM confirmed this a few years ago. In 1900, human knowledge doubled every 100 years. Today, it doubles every 2 hours. By 2040, it'll double today it doubles every 2 years. So 100 years, 1900, 2 years today, by 2040, it'll be every 12 hours. So, with that kind of rapid change that's going on today, it's clearly not going to be linear, and it's clearly going to be the innovative thinking that keeps us moving forward.
One of the nice things in addressing, when you address transgender, and you were talking about personality traits, and it's unfortunate that we put these traits in gender, because I'm a third-generation family business owner, and I say my entire success is what my mother taught me for commercially. For managing 7,000 people, you better be caring, nurturing, loving. None of those qualities my father taught me, my mother taught me. We say those are womanly traits. Well, I'm a man. I don't know if they're womanly or manly. All I know, if you want to manage a lot of people successfully, you need to have those traits. So I just wonder, relative to your genders, relative to those traits, do you think of those things in manly and female ways, or these are winning traits, losing traits? Where's the world going? Where is your head in terms of traits that allow you to win, traits that hurt you, and where do you see society moving?
Well, I think, I'm glad you brought that up, because these traits, what you're talking about is what good leaders understand. Good leaders we're not putting gender around these traits. We're putting what we need to have in place in order to be successful in this rapidly changing world with all the challenges we're facing. So now, of course, women have brought value, to our leadership world, certainly, and I will tell you, when I was 30 years old, I had a high-level position in the second largest computer company. And the lesson that I learned from a lesbian woman stays with me for life. I did something terrible. So I chewed out a female engineer publicly. And she, at the end of the day, she invited me to her office and she said, I want to tell you something that you just did and what impact it had. And she was the first person that taught me about gender. And that's not about gender, that's about recognizing compassionate and collaborative leadership. That one lesson changed my life. And I think that's because, I was young, it doesn't change with age. I'm still looking for better ways to be a leader. I always joke with people, I was always acting like a CEO, and they're like, what does that mean? It means figuring out what a good CEO is and then acting like that. That's what we need to do every day. So what I think you're talking about is very important. Good, innovative leaders recognize what's needed in order to make the best for the workforce. And it's wellness. It's recognizing that you can't have, I come out of a very dangerous business. It's recognizing you can't have physical safety without emotional safety. It's all those things that are important. And that's our responsibility as leaders.
I wonder if Emily and Meghan could speak to that in terms of, I know both of you, if I remember correctly, were in very male-dominated college majors, and you've had to kind of be one of the few women in several different worlds. Have you had to adjust your personality in any way, or have you had to shift and change in any way, or you just kind of, I don't know, how do you think about that question?
Well, in terms of the leadership, difference in male versus female leadership, I was the only supervisor that the distillery had ever had that was a woman. And my employees said that I was the best one they had ever had because I'd actually listened to them and took into account the changes that they wanted to make because they're the ones running it every day. They're the ones seeing it. So I took them seriously, which a lot of my male counterparts, they were just listening to themselves. They were doing what they thought would be best, and the willingness to listen definitely helped. And I was very sad to leave them because I actually got to know them. Whenever I was approving their time off, they'd come back and tell me about their camping trips. And I've tried to carry that over with my current employees, who I hired and who are honestly the greatest. I always brag on my first shift guy. I mean, he's awesome. He allows me to leave work, so he's great. But in terms of shifting my personality to adapt to a male field, I hope I haven't. I really hope I haven't. I definitely used to get called sweet a lot more, which Megan's laughing at because that doesn't come out of many people's mouths anymore. But I used to get called sweet a lot and was told the industry would ruin me and all that sort of thing, and I don't think that's true. I just think I've come into myself.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just learning who I was. I don't know that I changed because I was around guys, maybe because that's the environment I was in. I went to a college that graduated over 70% male. But college is a lot about where you learn about yourself anyways, and you grow, and I don't know if it would have been different if I had been around more females or not, but that's just the environment I developed in and where I grew and kind of came into myself a little bit more. So I hope I'm just the person I was, but I guess I'll never know because the place I was in was 70% plus males. So
I'm curious, oftentimes the most challenging female leaders I have encountered are those who have decided I'm going to act like a man. And I'm curious if that comment resonates with you, Because as a man, I understand the need for female leadership, but I also understand the need for female leadership that's not acting like men. And so there's this sort of strange mix here in terms of how you bring, saying that there are certain qualities that are one to the other. I agree with your point, but I do find sometimes one of the challenges for a small number of female leaders is they're so wanting to act like a man that they sort of forget what you guys are talking about. Have you guys encountered any of that kind of situation or issues?
I mean, whenever I'm disciplining people, I definitely am more stern. But I don't consider that acting like a man so much as just taking things seriously. And I'm still compassionate while I'm disciplining people. And I mean, I've encountered a few women in leadership roles that, like Marnie said, they were part of the patriarchy too. And they grew up and they came up in that environment where they had to deal with a lot of negative, awful things, and they thought that the way to get around that was by becoming part of it. And I just don't think that's the way to lead. But everyone leads differently, and I don't know if this is just my method of it.
I think keying off of what she just said, in my mind, it's sort of about authenticity. And so it's about leading in a way that's authentic to you, whether that's like a man or like a woman. And, I think that, I've encountered plenty of women. So I'm introverted, and I'm someone who sits and listens and thinks and then says something when I believe I have something to say, and not just all the time, which I think a lot of people think of as a female trait, but not necessarily, right? And I've had many people in positions of authority, both women and men, who have sort of chided me for not participating effectively, or not even effectively enough. Forget about effectiveness. Enough. You need to speak up more. And when I was younger in my career, I thought, okay, I guess I need to speak up more. I'll just be really uncomfortable and I'll say things that I haven't thought through, but none of that's not true. Or for me, that's not true, right? For me, that is inauthentic, and it is authentic to say, no, I'm engaging the way I engage. You'll listen, you'll hear, I will say something when I believe I have something to say, and the way I process things is by listening and thinking about them. It's really hard to say for someone who is an introvert and doesn't like to confront people. But I think that goes to sort of, authentic engagement and authentic leadership is to sort of, and maybe that's also a way to go back to one of the earlier questions about breaking down some of those barriers to sort of being able to hear people differently and engage with people differently. Part of it may be, for those of us who feel that we can, saying like, no, don't tell me to talk more. That's actually not helpful, and that's not authentic to me, and it's insulting. And I promise you I'll say something when I have something to say. That doesn't exactly answer your question, but I was thinking about it from something you said, so.
I think representation matters too. You can't be it if you don't see it, and people are taught to lead by their people they've been led by. So the more women we have leading in the workplace, the more that people can find that authentic style, not be so influenced by how they've been led in the past.
But I found that gender pressure because when I was growing up in my family business, all the older people wanted to toughen me up. They all said, oh, Charlie, you gotta toughen up. People take advantage of you. So it wasn't a gender thing, but it was a trait thing that if I was gonna be successful, I needed to be tough. That was interesting. That they told me, if I'm going to be a successful leader, I had to be tough. I had to be able to be a tough person. So that's a manly trait, quote, toughness. Interesting.
I think that goes back a little to what you were saying earlier, Christine, about maybe we don't need more tough people right now. We need collaborators. We need people who are willing to listen. We need people who are, going to be a little softer.
Yeah.
But I do think, yeah.
I'm going to add one thing too, because in working with this investor community now, I've talked to lots of investors, and a lot of people from the oil and mineral and gas fields are interested, but they tend to be that tough facade that you're talking about, and I'm not going to work with that. You know, I choose to work with people who are softer and who are collaborative. So it's, you know, I just know that this toughness is not the appropriate attribute we need for moving forward, at least in the business that I'm in.
I also think, going back to your point too of you know, women leaders trying to act like men, I think all of us, as we look at leaders and are evaluating them, it's really important for us to question how we're evaluating them as well, because you know, study after study has shown that the exact same behavior in a woman is perceived very differently when a man does it. So it's just these intrinsic biases that we all have, and understand that we all have them, you know, as woke as we are, you know, as PC, as educated as we are, we all have these intrinsic biases, and being willing to question ourselves is really important. Other questions? One other thought I had that I wanted to ask the panel is you know, as successful women and transgender women, how do we, you know, do you guys bristle at all of being categorized as successful women, or do you really just want to be known as kick-ass, you know, in the bourbon industry, and don't attach my gender to it? How do you feel about that question?
So I want to start because I'm grinning because I hate it. I hate it with every fiber of my being. I hate women awards. I hate, and I don't hate them for other people, but they bother me. They feel I'm successful. Full stop. Like, and that's, I even when I was approached to be on this panel and in this conference, I had some sort of internal, and I'll be honest, external. My husband was like, all right, enough, make a decision. As to whether or not it was even, I was like, I don't actually like that characterization. Having said that, I do think, I mean, obviously, I think it's an important conversation. I think to something that you just said, if we aren't modeling and being here and having this conversation, then we're actually not serving the next generation. And whether we call it successful women or whether we call it successful people, and it just happens to be a whole panel of women, you know, that's my own battle to fight, right? In my head, for the most part. But yeah, I actually hate it. I think we are successful, full stop.
Well, I might be in a different position. You know, I didn't anticipate, you know, running for office and all these things. I would end up being a default leader in the LGBT community. So with that responsibility, you know, you see me owning it in a big way, because if you look at the transgender community, you know, with a 47% attempted suicide rate, it's a very oppressed community with very low self-esteem. So this is why, as a leader, I own this in a big way. And so, you know, it may be different from others.
I'm a little bit with Marnie on it. I'd rather just be successful. Just categorize me as successful, but at the same time, I keep tabs on every single master distiller that's a woman, because that's where I want to be one day. So it's kind of twofold, where it's like I want to be successful in my own right, but I hope to one day be the person that someone else looks up to whenever they're like, oh, I want to be a master distiller. Oh, look, she's one. I want to be her. Like, because I do the same thing whenever I look up every other master distiller that's a woman. I look at their career paths. I look at where they went to school. I look at everything about them, and I'm like, maybe I could be that one day, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely kind of with Emily on this. I mean, what started me going into the beverage industry was an article in Whiskey Advocate who, like, after my freshman year, they released an article about a woman chemical engineer who was a master distiller. I can't even tell you which one it was. I have no idea. And it just...
Jeff the Creed.
You know?
Yeah, I know who it is. It's the distiller Jeff the Creed.
But the idea just, like, stuck in my head, and I saw her in this position, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And then I just got an internship in the cider industry, and it kind of moved on from there. But so I want to be successful, but I also don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for people to see me as a successful woman, because then other people can look up to that and see that.
I do think there are certain challenges that women have because of our female bodies that do actually make us stronger in our jobs and in the workplace. I know that's been true for me and people that I know well. So, but yes, it is hard to be talked down on, I think, about that. Well, you're successful for a woman, or wow, you're blowing me away because you're a woman. So, yes.
Okay, well, first I just want to say we have a daughter who's also a distiller. So it's really great to hear you two because it's giving me some things I can go home and say to her. But I think that we're in the farming community, and in farming, we are learning to use new pronouns. We're using to behave in new ways. And because we're a women-led farm, we are starting to create a new future. But we have a lot of young men that often work for us, and we are, creating new roles. And even though it takes a lot of meetings, management meetings, to say, how do we address this? How do we address this? It's a free space to learn in. And I want to ask each of you, are you in free spaces where you can learn how to move forward into the future with this new dichotomy of women running things and all the other new pronouns that we're now starting to embrace? So is it a free space for you where you all work?
Well, so I work for myself, and I'm a company of one. So I'm not the best person to answer. But it is fair to say that part of why I work for myself and I'm a company of one is because I was seeking some space to be authentic and to be creative and continue sort of the nonlinear path and to continue learning. But I think that part of my struggles in some of my past workplaces have been that they have not demonstrated that freedom.
Well, in the energy business, that freedom clearly doesn't exist. In fact, and I do think the language is very important. In fact, I'll tell you, a little while back, I was doing one of the readings at church, and of course I degendered the Bible, and one of the people in the audience says, "She's messing that up." The other person, no, she knows exactly what she's doing. But I do think that's very critical. I talk about line workers, not line men. But you hear even women. A lot of women continue to use those gender-specific terms, and I don't think it helps the female population.
Yeah. My current workplace is definitely a great workplace for moving forward, innovation. I feel like I'm more trusted than I've ever been. I feel like my company has more faith in me than I do, which is great. And I mean, it doesn't matter my gender. They trust my experience and they trust what I bring to the table.
Ditto. Same company. Same boss. Yeah, I think for both of us, and it's a pretty open environment in terms of like being able to go up to them and talk to them. I've never had any problem of not feeling like I can't address something.
Just as a career coach, I have a lot of professional women coming to me feeling stuck, unhappy with their job, and I think you hit the nail on the head on what the underlying reason why a lot of them are unhappy is they just don't feel free to be themselves, and they're questioned by supervisors and coworkers on every decision they make about their personal lives and, needing to leave work early for their kids or, balancing their home life with their work life, and they just feel miserable because they're not able to find that freedom to make their own decisions. But it does seem like there's more discussion about that. There was a viral Facebook thing going around recently with a senior manager who was talking about how, don't tell me why you have to leave early. You never have to explain yourself. You're an adult. So there does seem to be more discussion around managers realizing I don't need to be micromanaging my employees and how they're balancing their day and allowing them to feel free to be themselves in the workplace. So thank you. All right, yeah, other questions? Well, this was amazing. Thank you all for your great questions, and a huge thank you to this amazing panel. I'm really inspired about the directions that our workplace is taking and the fact that we have such amazing young people coming up in the workplace who are going to be amazing leaders, full stop, no gender attached. So thank you all. We have a couple more minutes for a little bit of networking. I think we're ending just a few minutes early. So thank you all so much.